He was elected mayor of Dish in 2007. The city of Dish is a community of about 200 residents, and it is located 25 miles north of Fort Worth. I got this information off the website, so it may not be the same. Dish sits atop the Barnett Shale, which is one of the largest natural gas fields in the United States. There are 10 massive pipelines that run through the town, carrying about 1 billion cubic feet of gas per day. Mayor Tillman spent much of his time in office fighting to regulate the gas companies, which transformed this once quiet town into a noisy, polluted industrial center. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mayor Tillman to share a story with us.
So anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming out, and I also want to thank those of you who are viewing online. Has how many people have seen Gaslight? Gaslight too. So some of you may have seen my story. I'll discuss a little bit about my story. That's not really the point of my presentation. One great thing that I found is there's some Texans in the room. We actually have Sue Ann over here, who I did not even know was coming, who was from Flower Mound, Texas. She has moved. She's also a refugee, was forced out of her home because of oil and gas exploration. So very delightful surprise that Sue Ann could make it. I'm not a native Texan. I actually grew up in Oklahoma. Grew up in a small town in the middle of an oil field. My father was a mechanic, and so for extra money on the weekends, he would go out and work on the pump jacks. Back in those days, that all the pump jacks were combustion engines. And so he would go out and work on the engines. So literally, from the time I could walk, I was on an oil patch site. So when I moved to Texas, I was not that concerned about moving into an area where there was some drilling activity going on. Back in those days, there wasn't this high-density type activity, and it certainly wasn't as extreme as it is now. And so, I was, like I said, I wasn't that concerned. I moved in, everything was fine, and then of course, with the development of the technology, hydraulic fracturing, and horizontal drilling, the activity just exploded in our area. And so, this is an aerial view of Dish, Texas. This is something you can get right off of Google Maps. This isn't something that's been photoshopped. Every single one of these white spots are oil and gas facilities. They're either well sites, production facilities, something like that. This is not fully developed. This is still active. There's still drilling going on. So there can be a lot more of those little white spots that will eventually be there. I encourage you to go to Google Maps and just Google Dish, Texas, and look at this. You'll see this exact map, satellite image on Google Maps. If you pan to the north, you will see that it's actually a lot denser. So when this activity begins, there's not going to be tens of wells. There's not going to be hundreds of wells. There's not going to be thousands of wells. There's going to be tens of thousands of wells. Every one of those wells represent a profit. Every one of those wells that isn't drilled represents a profit lost. So, So when I tell people that I lived in Dish, and I moved from Dish, I no longer live there. So we see gas on Tuesday in this story. I'll talk a little bit about that here coming up. People always want to know, where is Dish? So, as was provided in the introduction, Dish is located about 25 miles north of downtown Fort Worth, For those NASCAR fans or IndyCar fans, Texas Motor Speedway was basically out my front door when I lived in Dish. I could see the Speedway, and I could hear the Speedway from my front door in Dish. Dish was a very small community. 2 square miles, 200 people, veteran community, kind of place people move out, kind of just out to the edge of urban sprawl. To the edge of urban sprawl. Get them an acre, 2 acres, 5 acres, have a horse, that sort of stuff. That was kind of the demographics of Dish. There was some development just outside of our community, so the general community was around 500 people that lived in the extraterritorial jurisdictions of Dish. And so, being that it was just outside of the Barnett, or outside of the urban sprawl, Dish became a very popular route for natural gas pipeline. So, the Barnett Shale in the area that Dish was in, primarily they were extracting natural gas. About 15 miles to the west of Dish is where the test bed was for the slick water hydraulic fracturing that is being used all around the world in other shale formations. The Marcellus Shale, the East Shale, you have the Monterey Shale here. So there's shale plays all around the world, and the technology to extract the minerals from the shales was developed literally 15 miles to the west of Dish. So we were the test bed. We were where everything started. And so there was a significant amount of activity early on, before the Marcellus kicked up, before the Eagle Ford kicked up, before some of the other facilities or other shale plays started. So Dish was just outside of the urban sprawl, so it became a real popular route for natural gas pipelines. And so we had almost a dozen large, high-pressure natural gas transmission lines. Now, in order to have a gas field, you can't just have a well here and a well there. You have to have an extensive infrastructure in place. So literally, if you looked at the pipeline map over Dish, it would look like a spider web of pipelines. And so each of those pipelines carry an easement that can never have anything developed on it. So if you take a community 2 square miles and you have a dozen pipelines, and the larger pipelines have the larger easements, you literally have a 1,200-foot strip that goes through the community that can never have anything developed. Unfortunately, in Texas, and I'm not sure how it works in California, these companies have the power of eminent domain. So whether you want them there or not, doesn't matter. Because they can just come and they can take the land, take the easement, and put the pipeline in the ground across the property. Also, in Texas, the appurtenances to the pipelines are considered part of the pipeline. So the compressor stations, the dehydrating facilities, the processing facilities, all of that stuff is part of the pipeline. So all of that stuff has to be in place also. Natural gas doesn't come out of the ground as a clean burning hydrocarbon. It has to have all the impurities removed. And it's basically a mini refining process. And all that took place right in Dish. We had natural gas wells where they removed the gas. We had dehydrators where they processed and removed the impurities. We had odorizers where they odorized. And then we had compressors that pushed it out into the system. It was extracted from the ground in Dish, and it left Dish. It was ready for the kitchen stuff. So we had virtually every aspect of natural gas production inside of our local community. This is an aerial view of Dish. What you see at the bottom of the screen is a huge compressor station complex. There is a dozen compressors at one time. Some of them have moved. They range from about 700 horsepower to about 3,500 horsepower. These are huge engines. For scale, that's about a quarter mile across there. From here to here is a quarter mile. That facility right there, those exhausts are about 3 stories high. So they're pretty good size facility. That's dish in the background. Our winds, typically, our predominant winds are coming from this direction. My house is right there. It's directly downwind from the facility, as it was most other times. So you can see kind of a sprawling area. Everybody here has a couple of acres. I had 6 acres. I had a couple of horses. Bought my home and did a significant amount of work. We remodeled it, put in our fences, put in our barns for our horses. It was what we had wanted, what me and my wife had wanted for our families, for our entire lives. Most of you have probably been the same here, living our course of the American dream. So this is another view. This is from a horse ranch immediately to the east of the facility. Does anybody see anything strange about the trees? All of those trees in the background there are alive. In rural Texas, along a fence line, you will see a lot of trees that grow up, and it will become very thick. It will become thick to the point that you can't see the other side of the fence. That's what this looked like whenever the facility was built. You can see trees that have fallen down. After a couple of years, all the trees along that fence line were dead or dying. As the facility started to grow, the odors from the facility continued to get worse and worse and worse. They were removing all of those impurities that is found in the natural gas. They were dumping them into our air. We did some testing. We provided our data to the state. The state did some testing. Eventually, the state installed a permanent air monitor. That air monitor is going today. You can get online on the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and our air monitor is going. It gives us daily readings of the levels that are being emitted from the facility. Has anybody ever seen the documentary Split Estate? I would encourage you to watch that. Split Estate. It deals with oil and gas development in Colorado and New Mexico. And it deals primarily with surface owners who don't own the minerals and are just along for the ride. In most states, if you don't own the minerals, you have to provide surface for somebody to get to the minerals. So that's kind of the basis of the movie. But it talks about all these different people who are having health effects. And so, me and my wife were watching the movie. It came out right before Gasland 1 came out. And we were watching the movie, and they started playing through all of the characters or all the subjects of the movie, all the people who were interviewed. And they started talking about having nosebleeds. So I get nosebleeds all the time. Nosebleeds. At that point, it started to sink in that our 2 children were having a lot of nosebleeds. So we started to pay attention to the odors and to the level of contaminants detected at the permanent air monitor. They correlated perfectly.